Welcome to Buckets, brought to you by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. My name's Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, joined by Jim Turvey and Joe Delara, the future Jays, because this is your Sunday night for Monday morning, Monday best bets, and our weekly futures look with the future Jays here on Buckets. As a reminder, everything we talk about can be found in the award-winning Action Network app. You can find all sorts of cool ways to track your bets. You can find future plays. You can track down all of Stuckey's Buffalo Bills futures that did not come through. You can track down everyone at Action Network that bet on the Bills to win the Super Bowl, which I don't think is going to come through. As I sit here wearing a Travis Kelce shirt, I don't think it's going to come through, but I'll have to check on that to see whether or not that comes through. And they were playing a team that had, I was told, a soft-ass clown fraud run defense. And something weird happened with that game, but we'll find out. But we're going to talk about best bets on today's show. We're also going to do Six Man of the Year on today's show. That's what we're going to do. We're going to do Six Man of the Year. I have a bet that, honestly, I'm going to take a mea culpa later for not getting this on the show sooner for you listeners. It was in the app, but I will talk about that. We have Jim has one of those, like, he's really excited about it, so he doesn't even want to tell me what it is to get my reaction. We'll talk about Six Man of the Year in what is a wide open market here on Buckets. Also, a reminder, you can find all of our live shows on youtube.com/The Action Network. youtube.com/The Action Network. You can catch great shows like The Favorites Live, produced by one Matt Mitchell, who I am genuinely sorry for, Matt. Like, I am very, very sorry for all Bills fans this week. All Bills bettors can suck my toe, but now I was one of them. But still, I am very sorry for Matt Mitchell. You can catch The Favorite Show there as well. I'm sorry, I'm very hyped because this is after Sunday night's game where, like, a really good quarterback beat a running back. And it's very exciting that, like, a really good quarterback was able to beat a running back in his building. All right, let's get to best bets for the Monday slate. Okay, a little bit of a warning. This slate, you know what? I owe it to you to be honest. This slate sucks. We all kind of universally agree. We're at the part of the year where the lines have gotten really sharp. We have a lot of noisy stuff. We have a lot of weird spots. And we're starting to creep into that time when I really get nervous betting because I don't know who's looking at All-Star, who's looking at getting traded. Everything's really wonky right now. And on top of that, I don't love the slate. Like, I just don't. It's a very tight slate. So we will begin with best bets. Jim Turvey, what are your best bets for Monday?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. As such, I have a half derivative and a player prop. Nothing on the main spreads or totals, but I've got Hornets and Wolves first half under, and Paolo Banchero under on his points prop if Franz Wagner plays.
All right, Joe Delara, what are your best bets for Monday?
We have Anthony Edwards over 26.5 points and Giannis Antetokounmpo over 2.5 turnovers.
Okay. I have two plays on lines, and of course they are, I am taking the Philadelphia 76ers minus 13.5, and I am taking the Minnesota Timberwolves minus 15.5. I am laying a combined 29 points here in this game, on this slate. So this will be fun to talk about. Let's start, because we have two on Charlotte, Minnesota. Jim, let's start there. You like Minnesota, Charlotte first half under. Why do you like that?
Yeah, so I've been talking recently, either in the app or on Twitter, or just kind of to people who are, in betting circles I talk with. This is the time of the year that I do kind of like these quarter and half derivative markets. You do start to see some really nice patterns emerge with teams that are, strong in a first half scoring wise or poor defensively in the first half. And it's a little stickier than early in the season when there's a lot of noise. You still have to double check and make sure that, recent trends are on this because certain players are in or out. But these are two teams that really line up well for this first half under. So Charlotte is 26-14 to the first half under this season. Minnesota is 25-17. Those are the first and third ranked teams to the under in the first half this season. Last 10 games, that still matches up. It's 8-2 for Minnesota, 7-3 for Charlotte. Also checks the box for Charlotte when they're on the road and Minnesota at home. So there's no line out for the half right now, but this game as a whole is taking a little bit money to the over. So definitely wait it out. Try and thread that needle if you're going to be looking to bet this, where the line has stopped moving up, but first half as a whole has not been bet down yet. So you'll kind of want to, put those notifications on. I'll be trying to thread that needle myself, or if you're out there watching it, you can keep an eye on it. But this first half under with no number right now is a number that, unless it's, very strangely off of the game as a whole, is going to be a look I'm going towards.
Yeah, I've got this projected slightly under, and unders when the Wolves are home facing a team under 500. The under is 5-1 this season, so they've been a good home under squad there as well. So you would lean towards the first half as well. Just really quick, I've got this projected at 19. So I've got value on the Wolves at 15.5 here. That may sound extreme. Charlotte's really bad, and Charlotte doesn't have a center. Like, they have Nick Richards. They're going to get beaten up on the inside. They're going to really struggle to score. Charlotte's not good versus top 10 defenses. They've underperformed versus the spread in those kind of spots. The Wolves at home versus teams under 500 this season are 4-2 against the spread. The two losses came versus the Jazz and the Spurs. Now, those were both also predictably pretty big lines. That was late November. So that one actually was kind of a weird one. It was 11.5 on the Utah game, and they won by 11. So they missed it by the hook. And then the Spurs game, they only won by 8 versus a 12-point line. And that was obviously, and that's with a Spurs team that I honestly think with Victor Wembanyama is a little bit better than Charlotte, like, by a degree. So Joe, like, I understand that this is a lot of points to lay, but Minnesota beats the snot out of bad teams, and they're at home. And I think that they'll continue to beat the snot out of bad teams here. So I'll lay the 15.5.
Yeah, I definitely am comfortable with it too. And it kind of goes into why I like Anthony Edwards to go over his points prop. Ant has been even better at home, right? So he's averaging 27.8 points per game at home this season, exceeded the 26.5 in 11 of 19 games. So 58% of his home games this season. And when we look at the matchup against the Hornets, I think that Lamelo being there kind of helps a little bit in terms of pace, kind of helps a little bit with some, like, a little bit of turnovers, honestly, maybe a couple extra fast break opportunities. So I do think that, maybe the game stays competitive to a degree, so it's not like a complete blowout. But I do think that Minnesota should really take care of business here. Charlotte has one of the worst defenses in the NBA. I think that this is just a spot where, you have a little bit of competition, but I think between the two of those guys, between Lamelo and Anthony Edwards, being drafted in the same year, I think it's a game that Ant might want to get up for and, kind of ball out against his draft mate, or so to speak. And I like him to go over the 26.5 points in this home game, where I think Minnesota should really dominate from front to back.
Okay. I think that's, like, this isn't a complicated cap necessarily, but we're at the part of the season, I do think, where there's kind of like an opportunity here. Now, we'll say after game 41, it does become kind of a good trend to fade better than 60% teams versus worse than 40% teams. There's like a couple of trends that I found that lean in that direction. I have a lot more trends that favor the Wolves, but it's basically like, fade these teams when the other team is better than it, or fade or back the Wolves when the opponent is worse than them. And guess what? The Hornets are worse than them at just about everything. I will say this, after game 40, okay, this is over the last, I believe, 5 years is when I pulled this. When after game 40, when you have a 70% winning percentage team versus 30% or lower, the 30% teams are 58-33 for 64% against the spread. So I'm fading that here specifically because I like you could say, like, well, look, this is a low. If you like the under, how are they going to get to enough points? I legitimately think the Wolves are going to just hold them down to an absurdly low number. Like, they're just going to keep them really way down. By the way, this is since 2012 or 2013-14. I'm sorry. 13-14 is when this trend started. Those teams that are 30% win percentage or worse are 58-33-2 for 64% ATS. By the way, in those games, Jim, the under with a 30% win percentage team versus a 70% or better, the under is 50-39-4 at a healthy 56.2%. So
yeah, I was going to say that the Hornets team total might be kind of the combination of all of our plays there. And maybe if we zoom out for a second, I may put a little play on that as well. That seems to line up with kind of all of what we're talking about here.
Lastly, and this will play with my other pick as well, I wrote an article about this, and it's called because they were talking about in our Slack, the National Blowout Association. If it feels like there's been a lot more blowouts lately, it's because there has been. The rate of blowouts is up significantly this season versus prior seasons. You're just seeing a lot more. Now, that has creeped up the last couple of years in general, and for the reasons that you would expect. The offenses are better. 3-point rate is up. 3-point percentage is up. Like, there's just a wider gap. But the other thing that we're seeing this year is it's even beyond that, especially in January. Right now, teams are just absolutely kicking the shit out of these teams. So, hey, if you think that Charlotte is live here, and I will say that those 30% win teams are only 18-75, 19% straight up. But if you think Charlotte's live to cover here, maybe take them on alt spread because you can definitely juice that up. But I like Minnesota in this spot. Let's go to Joe. Let's do the Giannis over 2.5 turnovers prop versus the Detroit Pistons in what should be a raucous rematch of a thrilling game on Saturday in which the Bucks won. So I don't get to say, aha, I told you, because they just keep winning as they keep getting away with it. Why do you like Giannis over 2.5 turnovers?
I mean, the line is pretty juiced, right? So it's like minus 140 or so, depending on where you're looking right now at the time we're recording this. So I think this might wind up kind of being like a highly juiced number, but at the same time, he's hit this in 78% of games. So 31 of 40 games, he's had 3 or more turnovers. He just had 5 against Detroit in the last game. And the thing that honestly is that his usage is just so massive, right? That, he can get these turnovers. It could be a charge. It could be a bad pass. It could be anything. And I think that the way that they've been kind of asking him to facilitate a little bit more this season, because I was looking at his assists for this particular game, but I figured, I was like, all it takes is a bad pass, a charge, and we can kind of get to this 3 anyway. It's just the line is, I think, a full turnover low. So even though it's highly juiced, I still think that we have a pretty good edge here. I know that Detroit's defense is obviously poor, and they're not a particularly good basketball team, obviously, on the season, but I think that this is really more of a fact that, he could get a little bit too aggressive, generate offensive fouls, generate turnovers on, passes that he maybe isn't really supposed to be making. And we can get to 3 turnovers here, especially when we look at what he's averaging on the season, going over this in 78% of games, averaging 3.7 turnovers per game. I just really think this is a line. This is a full turnover too low. And I think that it's low because of the fact that it's a game against the Detroit Pistons where he really shouldn't turn the ball over. But I think that just by trying to do a little bit too much, we can get there at the 2.5.
Yeah, and he's going to force the issue, I think, because it's a team that he can, he'll want to dominate because they're not very good. I will say, they're big inside, right? Which I actually think might lead you to get over here even more because of the size that they have. So I like this play quite a bit. Giannis over 2.5 turnovers. I'll tell you on that. Jim, Paolo points under if Franz Wagner plays. Give me the cap.
Yeah, so Franz is pretty key for Paolo's usage and points per 100. That holds true for this season. Also for last season, it makes sense. They're kind of the 2 high usage players for the Magic. The book sniffed it out a little bit. So Franz returned to the lineup tonight as the Magic played the Heat. Books put 22.5 for Paolo's line, which is a little lower than they had been putting in games past because he had been playing so well with Franz out. But I still like this as an under. The Cavs defense is up to 2nd overall. And that's on the strength of being the number 1 defense for the last 2 weeks, even though they've had no Evan Mobley. Jarrett Allen, you and I were talking about a little bit today, has been playing some amazing defense. He unfortunately is not really going to get any love in the DPOY awards conversation, but he's playing outstanding. And the Cavs as a whole, their defense is really locked in right now. So Paolo did go under tonight. He went under that number, and if Franz does play, which is to me it is a big if, so definitely don't play this until you know for sure, because he just came back and now they have a back-to-back. So if he is in there, I like this Paolo under, but if not, I'm just gonna be sitting aside and just rolling with the first half under there.
Kind of a matchup thing here is that a lot of it is for me it's less about the usage, honestly, with Franz, and it's more about when Franz is on the floor, he acts as a primary or secondary creator. And when Franz is not on the floor, Paolo, like you've seen this, is like Paolo, especially versus tough defenses, Paolo is just basically like, I got to do all this by myself. Like that's what he did versus the Knicks, was just like, I'm just going to have to do this over and over and over and over and over again. And he can do it because he's awesome. But that to me, I think is like the sharp way to cap this, which is like if Franz is there, Paolo doesn't have to do hero ball shit.
Yeah.
And therefore the under is a good play. I like that analysis a lot. 76ers minus 13.5. How about this one for a trend this season? The Sixers win at home versus a team under 500. 10-2 against the spread, straight up and against the spread, 83% this season. Find yourself someone in life who loves you the way that Joel Embiid loves beating the shit out of shitty teams. Because, like, it is just great to see someone take their passion and put it into their work. And, like, no, you know, he'll come out and he'll try and play in the playoffs, but like this is where Joel Embiid is, like, this is his canvas for him to paint, is playing teams that are absolutely wretched. They're going to be
now. How many did he score against the Nuggets? I can't remember.
I don't recall. How many did he have? 40 what?
It started with a 4. I remember that.
It was significant. I know.
Maybe.
Is it January already? Wow. Joel's amazing. He's
I can't wait for that January 27th matchup. If he doesn't play, I'm gonna be so angry.
Oh, what makes you think he's gonna play, Jim?
I know. I think he will. We'll see.
No, let's be real. You don't think he will. You hope he will. Let's be real.
Yeah, no, that's a much better word choice. I hope he will.
Now, look, he might come in there and beat them. I actually think that matchup is really good for Philly. Like, if we get a Nuggets Sixers finals, I'm going to be honest with you right now, that may be the one team that I would pick against, that I would bet against the Nuggets, is the Sixers. That may be the one team I think can beat them in the finals. They match up really well with them. Regardless, look, I can't really criticize Embiid here. I can joke about it, but I'm very serious with this. If you want to build a great regular season record, I talk about this constantly. The 3 types of games that you need to win: games versus division teams, games at home, and games versus teams under 500. This is 2 of those categories. This is how you get home court. Like, I've seen a lot. The Wizards in the mid 2010s were the archetype of the other way, where everyone would be like, the Wizards got another great win versus the Heat, but then they would lose to some shitty team, and then they wind up with a 7 seed, and they would never go anywhere. The Sixers are taking care of business, and they are taking care of business dominantly. Their average margin of victory in these games is 14.9. They win these games by 14.9 points. They are ATS. They are +5 in ATS margin versus teams under 500. I'm laying the wood. I think the Sixers are going to win this game like 120-100. So I'm going to take the Sixers here minus 13.5. And hey, if you want to lay the 15.5, I think you're good. I think you can escalate. I might do an escalator on this one because I really do think they're going to dominate him. You guys got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think actually one of the markets that I've kind of been experimenting with is there's a market out there that's for a team to score 100 plus in the first 3 quarters. And you can get like decent odds on some of these teams, especially in, I think, what can be blowout potential games. Part of why I like the market is I think that you can kind of get ahead of the blowout because teams, like, they will try to put the other team away going into the 4th quarter, so that, like, you know, and you generally are going to see their regular rotations going through the first 3 quarters of the game. Games don't usually get super out of hand that early, where it's like at halftime, like a 50 or 60 point game. So I think the first 3 quarters is interesting, and to score 100 points, like, you don't even necessarily have to be blowing the other team out. It could just be a high scoring game. But I think if you want to bet on offense, I think it's almost like a safer way to bet on a team's like alternate overs, as opposed to like the 4th quarter, like a full game alternate team total over, because then you start running into like where you get deep into the bench if it really is a blowout. So it's definitely something that I might keep an eye out for in this game. I do think your cap is right though, Matt.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was thinking the exact same thing slightly to next to. I was going to ask. I haven't looked in this, Joe. You know this better than I do. Do they have props specifically for like Embiid points through 3 quarters? Because that smells to me of a thing that they would think is an extreme that's due for regression, but I actually think is pretty. There's a lot of stability in what he is doing in those first 3 quarters against these terrible teams. Is that a market that is out there, Joe?
I wish it was. I haven't seen it. I've seen, normally you see first quarter stuff.
Yeah,
There's some first half stuff. Uh, and I've seen like live things where you can bet into a market where it's like so and so will score X amount of points in like the fourth quarter, but it's live, so it's like it's very malleable, it's fluid, it's hard to cap in advance, and it kind of a lot of it depends on what the score is like when you're watching it, and it's like what's happening, what's this rotation look like, but I think that the 3-quarter bet is interesting just because you can kind of get ahead of like a blowout essentially if you're like calculating it that way, or if you think it's going to be a pretty high paced and fast paced game. And like the Spurs play super fast, so I do think it's a great opportunity for Philly to kind of get out to a pretty hot start here through 3 quarters.
All right, so to wrap up our best bets for the Monday slate, we've got 76ers minus 13.5, Wolves minus 15.5. Those are mine. Jim's on Charlotte, Minnesota, first half under. Paolo points under if Franz Wagner plays. Wait to make sure that he's going to play on the injury report. And I would actually, are you with me on this, Jim, that you should probably wait, just bet it before the game? Like, don't risk it in case.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, make sure that he's going to play. Joe's on Giannis over 2.5 turnovers versus the Pistons, and Ant over 26.5 points versus the Hornets. All right. We're going to do 6 man of the year right now because I want to get to this one earlier and could not do it. This has been a fascinating market to kind of watch. And the reason it's been fascinating is if we look at what typically defines this is one of those awards, and there's most improved is kind of in this category too, where the awards will go one of two ways. MVP is always it's such an important award, and the guys are so good at the top. It's like, it won't be decided by January 1. It might be almost decided, but there'll still be well, 6 man and most improved can be settled in like the first month of the season. You can argue most improved might have been this year with Tyrese Maxey. We'll see how the rest of the season goes. With 6 man, but the other way, if it's not decided that first month of the season, there's no answer, and everybody's just like, I don't know. Like, it's got to be somebody. Somebody's got to win the thing, and that's kind of where we're at with this award, where it's like there are candidates. There's a market for it, but it's not a good market. It's not like a market that you can feel like, oh yeah, I definitely have a handle on this. So currently at BetMGM, king of sportsbooks, Tim Hardaway Jr. continues to be the favorite at plus 175. And I get it because Tim is like putting up points for a playoff team off the bench. I get it. I do. No one's talking about Tim Hardaway Jr. Like there's zero, but like, have you guys heard anyone being like, who's like the best 6 man in the league right now? Is like no one. Like, no one's talking about the Mavs bench or about Tim Hardaway Jr. It's literally just like shooty hoops man score points for playoff team. And that's why we get here. Malik Monk has moved to plus 310. Bogdan Bogdanovic was the favorite at one point. He's now to plus 650. And there's one other name. But I will go ahead and ask this. I want to just check in on this. Are we all in agreement that Tim Hardaway Jr. is a weird choice here, given that there is like no juice for him whatsoever? Jim, you are nodding yes.
Yeah, and ironically, this is the position that I would love. I hopped on Hardaway early in the season, and it would be the best turnout for me if he does win it. But I am really surprised that he is held on to such like a heavy favorite comparatively to some of the other awards right now. And I think it's a very open conversation, of which I don't even agree that he is necessarily the favorite right now. So I think this is a great market to get into right now because the favorite, I don't think should be the favorite, and certainly not by the margin that he is.
All right. So I got my guy, and I'll go ahead and talk about him, and then we can get to the rest of them. This is the one I feel bad about. I should have put this one out into a column, or I should have gotten him on some sort of, I should have talked about him on the pod. I should have thrown him in on one of them and just been like, oh, hey, by the way, you should bet this now. It's Jordan Clarkson, who was 12-1 like 2 weeks ago. That's been cut in half. He is plus 500 now at BetMGM. I put a parlay on him at plus 650 still. I still think there's good value on him at plus 500. The Jazz, there's two things to kind of go along with this. The Jazz seem like a team that are going to at least compete for a play-in spot. Everything I hear is not like they're selling off pieces like last year. Like, it was pretty known, like, hey, they're not going to keep Beasley or Vando and Mike Conley, they're probably like, that's a lot of money. They're probably going to move Mike and let him go somewhere where he can compete. That's not the case this year. Like Danny Ainge is probably looking for upgrades. That doesn't mean he'll get there. For me, it's more about, I don't even care if they make a trade. I am more focused on the fact of they don't want to get worse. They're not going to turn around like they did last. They are unlikely to turn around and get worse as they did last season. They have a lot of momentum. They like how they're playing. They are heading in the right direction. Will Hardy's obviously a really great coach. You could say like, hey, that trade might be with Jordan Clarkson. You're right. But the odds of Jordan Clarkson going somewhere and starting, in my opinion, are low. I think if Jordan Clarkson is traded somewhere like New York or Orlando or Dallas, one of these teams, I think he still comes off the bench as a microwave scorer role. He's already won the award, which is a very big deal. We've talked about that before, about how important it is to have already won it, because we have a lot of repeat winners in this category. So for me, Jordan Clarkson still at plus 500. Jim is the best value on the table. Am I worried about the Jazz getting to the playoffs? Yes. I still think it might be possible if they're just like in the play-in tournament, it might be enough to get this home.
Yeah, so Clarkson is, I'm lumping him together with one other player who definitely has my attention, but I do want to see, I want to wait till the trade deadline. And I know that will hurt the number, but I really want to see for him and for Cam Thomas, who it's important to note, I think we've talked about this in the past, but you do not need 65 games played for this award. Several of the awards you do, this is not one where you do. So Cam Thomas's injuries do not matter as much here. These are the number 2 and 3 scorers off the bench this season, but they have both started enough games that, you said you don't see Utah going into sell mode. I trust your judgment on that far more than mine, but I do get nervous about the Nets and the Jazz in that, if they get good offers, they may well offload guys, and those guys, Cam Thomas and Jordan Clarkson, could either be outgoing and, like you said, likely still off the bench, but it might impact their numbers overall. If Clarkson went to a team where he's now the 8th man instead of the 6th man, that's going to hurt those points per game. So these are two guys I want to wait. The trade deadline is not that far away. I want to wait to see where those two guys are going before I play either of them, but they both very much have my attention in this award market for sure.
Joe, who's your guy? Who's your bet? What do you like?
I like Clarkson, but I think the guy that I like with the number anyway is I'm looking at Caris LeVert. He's 12-1.
Yeah.
He's averaging like 12-ish points off the bench. I think that the big thing here for me is that like without, we've seen him play without Garland. We've seen him play some games without Donovan Mitchell, but I think that at the end of the day, his role is pretty secure in playing off the bench. And I think that getting it at 12-1 now, while he might not be like the best pure scorer out of all of these guys, like I think Clarkson realistically probably is. I think at the end of the day, the role that he has is very secure. So with guys that like other guys being on the market, whether they get traded, whether they get moved, maybe their roles change, whatever the circumstances, I'm pretty confident that Caris LeVert is going to not only qualify for the award, but he's also going to be somebody that's constantly in contention here. The Cavs are continuing to just kind of stick around. The defense has been really good, even without Mobley, and they've just been, the record's good. So I think that Caris LeVert is somebody that does get enough. Well, he probably will get enough buzz, even though he's coming from Cleveland, to kind of get looks at the award. And I think having him at 12-1, the way we've seen this market kind of move around and bounce around all over the place, I don't hate having a 12-1 ticket on LeVert to kind of add to a portfolio of 6 men of the year candidates.
I like that, 6 men of the year. My only thing, so this kind of goes with the Jared Allen comment earlier from Jim, which is like, there's a problem. No one knows the Cleveland Cavaliers play basketball.
Yeah, that is the problem.
Like no one's aware. Like even Bill Simmons was doing this power poll, and he was like, "You look up and like the Cavs are what?" Like he's like no one. They're not on TV. No one talks about them. Mitchell's not dropping 50. They're just like hanging in around for a home court advantage spot. Like they're probably going to be the 4 seed. Like just kind of hanging out, and like so there's no real like oomph there with what it is. I think like trying to evaluate, one of the interesting things about this is like trying to evaluate the role of we've talked about this before, but the role of advanced metrics in this award is really fascinating, because it used to be like it did not matter. Like you could just be like a negative dude and it just didn't matter at all. And that's kind of changed in recent years where BPM is like a little bit better. And so like there's all these kind of guys that matter, either BPM or EPM or any of the PMs you want per minute. And actually, by the way, the best offensive box plus minus guy coming off the bench this season, minimum 20 games, less than 10 games started, is Kevin Love. He's actually the best one, but guess what? Kevin Love's averaging 9.8 points, and that's not going to get it done.
Yeah.
I think Malik Monk is like the guy that when I do the stats analysis, he's the one that I look at and go like, there's probably value on Malik Monk still. That like he might get there. I just don't know that the Kings are. I honestly am worried about the Kings as much as I am about not as much as about the Jazz, but I'm concerned about it. Like Jim with the Jazz, I do want to follow up there real quick. One of the concerns is like, yeah, no, they're gonna go for it as long as marketing doesn't get hurt. And then it's like if marketing gets hurt, they're gonna be like, da 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 da. That's a wrap, boys. Everybody take a seat, and that'll be it. I am very interested, Jim, to find out. I think Caris LeVert's it's a tasty CLV sandwich, Joe. I just
it's one of those. Like I can't wait to just have this lose at like 4-1.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. All right, Jim, it's time. You've been very excited about your pick all day. What's your best bet for Sixth Man of the Year right now?
All right, so I will be clear. This is going to be a tasty CLV sandwich for sure because he's missing one. He's missing one big element in that he is not on a team that's going to be anywhere near the postseason. But ironically, the move to the bench that Jordan Clarkson made was on December 23rd. There's another player who made a move to the bench on December 23rd that same day and has not shot up the Sixth Man of the Year standings despite having equaled his points per game since moving to the bench. It's Keldon Johnson. He is out there at 200-1 right now, and he is averaging basically the same off the bench as he was as a starter, which is a very strong stat line for Sixth Man of the Year. He's averaging 17 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists a game, and has seen basically no drop-off in his production. I can see Matt's thoughts are already incoming. Fun. But this is he is at no risk of being moved into the starter's role again, I think, because it wasn't really done from we're going to bench you because you're not playing well. It's more of a fit, and we want to have a specific starting lineup around Wemby. So Keldon is a guy, I don't think he is winning this award, but he moved to the bench and his production has been the exact same. He's the third leading scorer off the bench behind Cam Thomas and Jordan Clarkson for the season. So he should be in this conversation. 200-1 is a crazy number. It's just because he started the season as a starter and it has not been noticed that he went to the bench and has kept up his production. So this is one that, you're going to bet and you're going to look quote unquote smart when the number drops. It also probably is not going to win, but that does not mean I'm not going to add a little bit to my portfolio.
You're sick, man.
Jim loves betting these guys on non-playoff teams for awards that are almost always going to guys on playoff teams.
I was more than one in every 200 years that one happens,
It's funny too that you say that because I was looking at another guy that's 200-1. If you guys want to, for the listeners that want to hear our 200-1 nonsense,
let's do it.
I think I would rather bet on Jaime Jaquez at 200-1 because I think if Jimmy's healthy, he's not going to start. They're redundant. We've seen that he can put up numbers like if he does have to start and does have to fill in. But I think that off the bench, he's like pretty valuable. The Heat are in the playoff picture. So that's one thing he's got over Keldon. Yeah, and I think and like he's a rookie. So we've seen rookies don't traditionally win this award. They have won it. I think there's been one rookie that's won it before.
Ben Gordon.
Ben Gordon. Yeah, there we go. So Ben Gordon's won it before, but I do think that, he's coming off, he's been out for a couple games. I think at the end of the day, he's not winning Rookie of the Year. This could be a way to give him something like because there really isn't, in my opinion, like a great Sixth Man of the Year candidate this year. I think Clarkson's probably the best one. So I think that a 200-1 dart on a guy who's put up meaningful minutes for what looks to be a playoff team in Miami and can kind of step up into the starter role. He can score pretty well on his own. 200-1. I'd rather throw my dart of 200-1 there. No offense, Jim, but he was something that I was 200-1 dart. Yeah, exactly.
We should see who gets closer to the bullseye at the end of the season.
So I said this data to you guys last week when I was looking at it. The minimum number of wins for a Sixth Man of the Year winner in the last 20 years is 42. That's the minimum. Now, I don't know if the Jazz are going to win 42 games.
The Spurs are tracking for what, like 44 right now?
Just go ahead and half that, and
maybe divide by 4.
In 2 seasons. Yeah.
yeah. The last 10, it's still 42. There was a year that Lou Williams went on a 42-win Clippers team, and the last 5, the minimum is 48. The average in the last 20 of wins is 52.5. So like, this is I do think this is actually kind of interesting, right? Is like, it's historically gone to really good teams. It's historically gone to like guys on really good teams. So this does kind of bring an interesting question. Let's take that approach. Not that the Keldon Johnson bet isn't great, because it is. I'll throw Jaime into this. Who's going to have more wins? The Mavericks, the Heat, the Cavaliers, the Kings.
Ew, it's disgusting.
Yeah, let's do those 4: Mavs, Heat, Kings, Cavs. Who has the most wins of that group?
I think the Cavs, based on the fact that they're going to be getting guys back. Like, they're 25-15 right now. They're getting guys back. I think the Cavs have the best chance to like have the most wins out of that group.
And LeVert's only started 1 game.
Yeah.
So he's locked into that role. Now, I will say, like, if any team, like if a team calls and is like, hey, how's Caris doing? The Cavs are going to respond with like, best shave of his life. Unbelievable. Have you seen his scoring splits? Incredible. Great locker room, dude. You want this guy in your locker room. Like, they would be they want a wing upgrade. This has been the thing about them for weeks and weeks, is like, they want a 3-and-D upgrade. Yeah. They paid all this money to Max Strus. They want more shooting, and they're still trying to find that guy that's like apparently Sam Merrill is not the answer. So like, and Caris is the easiest one for them to move. So that's like a little bit of the danger with Caris, is he might wind up going somewhere where they're like, fuck it, let's start him. Like, he's our best guy. You know, like if the Spurs do that trade, because like the Spurs might legitimately like trade for Caris LeVert and then start him. Like, that would not be like wholly unsurprising to me. Yeah. Or wholly surprising to me. So you are selling me on LeVert though, because if we look at if we judge it by that metric, if we go by, in the past, these guys have won 50 games. The Cavs are probably much closer. The Heat are probably the next closest. The Kings are probably the next closest. And then I don't know, maybe the Mavs, maybe, but I have a hard time with the Mavs just from the perspective of like, I guess here's a question. So right now, Tim Hardaway Jr. is at 18 points a game, and that's strong. Like, don't get me wrong, 18 points a game. Norman Powell's at 13. Is it impossible for Norman Powell to have a really strong scoring month and get this up to, or rest of the season it would take, and get him up to like 15.5, 16 points? And is the difference between 18 and 16 going to be enough to take Tim Hardaway over Norman Powell for a very good Clippers team? I don't know. So like that, I think is part of the equation to do it. So Jim, I do want to ask you this though. All jokes aside, do you feel like there is a possible, like, tell me the voter logic of person that has been entrusted with a ballot, I'm going to vote for Keldon Johnson. Tell me like what the logic is.
I think it would not be a first place vote, but I think that this is not an award that is given the in-depth look that MVP or even Defensive Player of the Year because there's all defensive teams. I think that a lot of times you'll get the in-depth research into the top spot and maybe the trend holds there, and then down the ballot is not going to hold. The trend is not going to hold as much. It's going to be control sort, points per game off the bench, and Keldon has a chance to be, if not the top guy, in the top 2 or 3 right there.
Okay. Yeah, it's a weird year just because like I looked at minimum 20 games and less than 15 games started. And the drop off is significant. It goes from like Hardaway at 18, Bogey, Caris, Quickly, who's no longer coming off the bench, Malik, Mathurin, who's interesting at 14.5 points per game for Indiana.
If you could play,
Yeah, Jaquez at 14, which is interesting. Kuminga at 13.6, but now we're into the 13s, and it's just like the average on this is 17 points per game historically. The minimum is 13.7, so like Kuminga is below that mark. All of the guys in the 13s are below that mark. Like if we start weeding out based off of historical trends, we don't have anybody. Like if we start weeding out based off of historical trends, we don't come up with anybody because Bogey and Clarkson aren't going to win enough games. That's why Hardaway's probably the favorite, is because like Hardaway's the only one that checks the boxes. So I don't know what to do with that. I like my Clarkson bet, and I think I'm going to add LeVert, but I think that's tough, Jim, to try and like evaluate the fact that there's no like, oh, this fits what we've seen. Which
I really do. Yeah, I really do think that's another reason that this market has stayed intriguing through, mid to late January here, is that there really is not a great fit for this right now as we see it historically. And that you do wonder if that means that the door could be open for one of those factors not hitting this year. I still think it will skew in that direction, but maybe that's more of a reason to like Clarkson. Like maybe this is the year that it does drop from 42 to 40 instead of following every single neat little part of that box, because there really just isn't a great fit for it this year.
You know what's frustrating is like Nas Reed should be a slam dunk here. He should just be like a slam dunk. He's 8th in offensive BPM. He's averaging 13 a game, 5 boards. He's awesome. He spreads the floor. Like this is what's always frustrating about this award, and this is why I've referred to this as the guys that you bet because you think that they should win, as the Brandon Anderson, Joe Ingles memorial vote is like. Brandon was just like, Joe Ingles is going to win this award. Like he's the best player off the bench, and I was like, you're right. He's not going to win. Because shooty hoops, and that's like the thing is like you do need to score historically.
Yeah, one player that I think I want to keep an eye out on, because like I know like obviously we're talking about people getting traded, things that this is a pretty malleable market. Brogdon has only started 18 of 32 games. He seems like somebody that may get moved to a contender. I don't know if he starts for said contender. I think that given the fact that he's, won the award, I think that he could be another really interesting kind of piece, especially if he goes and kind of runs a bench unit in, on what could be like a major team that's making a playoff push. So it's hard to bet into the market when you think there are guys that maybe could get traded from bad teams to then good teams. And it's like, as long as they still are hitting the criteria, then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, this guy is actually really impactful and good off the bench.
The teams that want a backup point guard, or the teams that want a point guard, most of them want a starter. Sixers might be the alternative here, but they're not going to like take one of their major pieces and then trade him for Brogdon to come off the bench. Like that's not a big enough upgrade for them. The Lakers want to start him. The Magic would start him. So, like, I think that the risk with Brogdon is, like, you definitely just wait till the deadline.
He's not even listed anywhere. So it's like, but he's just a name that I would kind of keep an eye on.
And he'll pop at a long number if he gets traded, even with the surge that happens after those kind of things. Mm-hmm. And I think you might be in a pretty good spot. But you're also, the other thing is, like, there's always the injury concern with him. So it's tough. Yeah. Before we get out of here, Jim wanted to talk about the Northwest Division after the Oklahoma City Thunder got a monster win versus the Minnesota Timberwolves on Saturday night. Thunder, I currently have projected to finish with the number 1 seed at 63 wins. That's what I have them on pace for, is I have them on pace to win the number 1 seed in the Western Conference with 63 wins. I know I feel the same way, Jim, where I'm just like, I keep looking at my numbers and being like, please calm down. But God, they're good. Talk to me about the Northwest Division and how you want to bet it, Jim.
Yeah, so it seems like the market was a little slow to react. So as of this morning, you could get plus 260 on the Thunder to win the Northwest Division. They now have won 2/3 over both the Wolves and the Nuggets. And in both of those situations, the fourth game is at home as well. So that's really key. They had the 4th easiest remaining schedule per Tankathon. They're only 1 game back now as is. They have a better adjusted net rating than the Wolves as is right now. And the way I want to play this, I also potentially want to even get in on the Nuggets a little bit at like a smaller amount. I posted this on Twitter at 3 units. I want to get the Nuggets. They have a tough stretch of schedule coming up, so I want to get them right after they go through that and potentially have a couple more losses, and the number could potentially be a little bit longer. So I think that there's a lot of room here because I'm looking to fade the Wolves a little bit in the futures market. I think they're a great team, but I think they're the 3rd best team of these 3. And I think grabbing the number on the Thunder now and then the Nuggets in a week and a half or so is how I'm going to look to play this division rest of the season.
The tough stretch was supposed to be with Boston, and then they beat them in what was an awesome game on Friday. But they do have their on the road on the East Coast through next weekend. or this upcoming weekend when you hear this on Monday, and then they're home for the Bucks and then the Sixers game, presumably without Joel Embiid. So yeah, you do have an opportunity to wait here and get a better number. The other thing I will tell you is the Nuggets are very keen, like will tell you very quickly how many back-to-backs they've had. They've had the most back-to-backs in the league so far this season. They have the fewest back-to-backs the rest of the way. The Minnesota Timberwolves have had the fewest back-to-backs so far this season. They have the most the rest of the way. So for those of us that got in on Wolves this summer, we have a great opportunity here to start messing with some things. I will say that I still like OKC better than Denver, and
Same.
a lot of this is just like my numbers don't love. I have never loved Denver. They're going to continue to be like, because Denver's bottom 10 in both, bottom 10 in both transition offense and defense. So my model is always going to be kind of like, like they're good, they're really good, but like meh. And the other thing is that Denver, I will tell you this, is that Denver will absolutely gear down after All-Star. Like they are pushing through this part of the schedule. They're going to put themselves in a position to lock up a top 4 seed, and then they're going to coast like they did last year. Yeah. They are not going to, if it's them and OKC, they won't race OKC to the end. OKC, I think, will do it because OKC has a lot to gain from going through that process of like, how many games can we win this year? Like that's a good growing step for a young team. And it's harmful because it's like, it raises, oh, you're the 1 seed, but they know that they're not expected to win a title this year. So they can just like, oh, this is what it takes to get to the 1 seed. Now we can learn how to manage that next year. I think OKC is much more likely to push through to the end. So just based off of schedule with those numbers, I think there's really good value at plus 240 on the Thunder, Joe.
Yeah, I think that you're both right on this, especially given the fact that, Denver, I don't think necessarily, like you said, is going to care. I also think that, honestly, like if they had to play either the Wolves or the Thunder in the second round of the playoffs, they really wouldn't care. Like I think that as long as, like you said, that they're in the top 4, that they'll be fine with that, get home court in the first round of the playoffs, they'll be like, that's absolutely fine to them. I think that with Minnesota, as much as I've liked them, they definitely are kind of in that position now where you're like, they've been healthy. They haven't really missed anybody. They missed McDaniels for a bit, but it's definitely a tougher scenario for them moving forward. They have 3 games just in and of itself against Denver head to head, whereas Oklahoma City only has 1. So I do think that Minnesota's schedule, like the top of their schedule, like the toughest games that they have, like even though they have one of the easier schedules overall, the tough games are tough. Like they got 2 against the Bucks, 1 against the Thunder, 3 against the Nuggets, 3 against the Clippers. Those are some tough games that are going to be very difficult for them, I think. So I think having Oklahoma City here at that number is pretty good value there, Jim.
All right, that's going to do it here for Buckets. Appreciate you guys tuning in, listening. We'll be back tomorrow with best bets for Tuesday. I'll have J Money, and I'm not sure who I'm going to have next, but we'll have J Money and somebody else with me on Monday. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Give us those 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. If you're listening to this, take a second. Just give us those 5-star reviews. Helps us out so much. My thanks to Jim Turvey, Joe Delaire, the Future Jays. You can catch them on Twitter and in the Action Network app. My thanks to David Payne, our producer, as well as Hutton Jackson, the video crew, getting us up on youtube.com/the Action Network. We'll see you guys again next time. Till then, let's get buckets.